Now that we have an objective definition of the term apartheid, let's take a closer look at reality in Israel and see if we can find even one hint towards the existence of that term or that reality in our country. Look, the first thing we need to look at, of course, is the issue of population size and ratios. For example, the Jews in Israel that are, claim to be employing apartheid are actually a majority. So the fact that they are also a majority in parliament is a testament to democracy, not to apartheid. There's no way to compare 80% of the Jews in Israel to the small minority of whites in South Africa. Nor would it be correct to compare between the small minority of Arab Israeli citizens in Israel, representing only 20% of the population, to the vast majority of blacks in South Africa. But it doesn't end with size and population. The fact that there's a majority of Jews in the Israeli government doesn't mean that the Arab Israeli citizens aren't represented. Not at all. Unlike the blacks in South Africa, the Israeli Arabs are allowed to vote, they do vote, and they can certainly get elected. In the current parliament alone, there are 3 political parties representing the Arab Israeli citizens, together holding 10% of all seats in the Israeli parliament. That's 12 parliament members. So as you can see, democracy at its best from that perspective. But let's move on. If in South Africa the blacks couldn't get any job they wanted and there were laws restricting them, well, think about Israel for a minute. In Israel in 2001, the parliament passed an Equal Employment Act for the benefit of the Arab Israeli citizens, stating that government offices, that government-controlled companies would be forced legally to hire at least 20% of their workforce from the Arab Israeli population so that there would be an equal representation in the workforce. It gets even better than that. In 1999, Israel appointed the first Arab Israeli Supreme Court judge. Can you imagine that happening in the apartheid of South Africa? We don't even have to go that far. Can you imagine a Jew being appointed to parliament or to the Israeli Supreme Court or to the country's Supreme Court in Jordan or Syria or Egypt or Lebanon or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or Zimbabwe or Libya? Absolutely not. It would be unheard of. And yet these are the countries who are leading the protest against Israel. These are the countries that are pointing at us and saying, look, they're not a democracy, they're an apartheid state. So remember, to say that Israel is an apartheid state is absolutely incorrect. The situation for the Arab Israeli citizens here doesn't remotely resemble the situation of the blacks in South Africa.
רגע, אריאל, אז מה אתה אומר שהמצב של הערבים בארץ הוא טוב?
Not at all. He's asking me if I'm saying that the political situation, the cultural situation for the Arab Israeli citizens is all that great in Israel. That's not what I'm saying. Certainly there are things that need to be improved. I'll even be the first one to say that discrimination does exist in Israel to a certain degree, and not only against the Arab Israeli citizens. There are forms of discrimination in Israel against women. That exists, unfortunately. There are forms of discrimination in Israel for public access for people who have physical limits and people who have handicaps. Israel has a long way to go. We can get better. We can improve. Just like I think countries in Europe can improve. Just like I think America and the United States can improve. But there's a very big difference between saying that there are certain forms of social injustice in a country and saying that that country is an apartheid state like South Africa was in the previous century. That is simply incorrect. And saying that doesn't help promote the people who need to get a better reality in this country. Singling out Israel as an apartheid state when we are not one, and disregarding many other countries in the world who do conduct grave violations, that is injustice at its worst, and that's what we have to fight against.